This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
A very good morning. You're watching News 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra, and latest news coming in this morning. Fugitive Mehul Choksi has been arrested in Belgium. We'll get you all those details on the show. Also on the show, what's happening with the electronics and smartphone industry? Are they or are they not exempt from tariffs? That is the big story that we're tracking for you today. And also coming up on the show this morning, are your 40s turning to be fatal for your career? And what is this new concept of 40 over 40? Employees over 40 years of age and drawing more than 40 lakh rupees are seeing the fag end of their career. We'll discuss that and more. You are watching Morning Brief at 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. First up, let's bring you the headlines we're tracking for you this Monday morning. The US government grants tariff exemption and exclusion for smartphones, computers and other electronics components. Meanwhile, the US also prepares that there would be new tariffs coming on electronics. So is the tariff scene with smartphones and electronics, especially for China, on or off? We will bring you some sort of clearance to that confusion on the show today. Meanwhile, India has a 20% cost advantage on the iPhones which get exported to the US. This comes in the understanding that China may not be completely exempt and the baseline tariff of 20% on smartphone exports to the US stay. Meanwhile, Apple's iPhone production in India surges with 2 lakh crore rupees in total smartphone exports, out of which 1.5 lakh crore in the iPhone exports and 60% growth in output, even as iPhone strengthened its 8% market share in India. Meanwhile, the United States enforces new 30-day immigration rule requiring all foreign nationals to register with federal authorities, sparking backlash from immigrant rights groups as penalties loom for non-compliance. Gold prices surged 23% just this year alone, hitting record highs amid trade war fears, recession concerns and a weaker dollar, with experts predicting further gains to 97,000 rupees per 10 grams by the end of 2025. And fatal 40s for employee careers are here, as per Shantanu Deshpande, who highlights the stress and pressure of balancing family responsibilities, EMIs and career challenges. We'll discuss that later on the show on what you could do to avoid the fatal 40s. And latest news coming in this morning, fugitive businessman Mehul Choksi arrested in Belgium over the 14,000 crore rupee PNB loan fraud case after years on the run since fleeing India in 2018. What next for Mehul Choksi? We discuss on the show. And cash-strapped electric ride-hailing startup BlueSmart to exit core business and pivot to becoming a fleet partner for Uber after nearly 6 years in the mobility space. The other stories we are tracking for you. First up, let's begin with the top story. And in a major move, the United States government has granted tariff exclusion for smartphones, computers and other electronics, most of which are imported into the US from China. Now, these products will be spared from President Donald Trump's new reciprocal tariff, soared to 125% this week for China. Now, while the White House hasn't mentioned the reason behind this exemption, a spokesperson clarified that it applies only to the reciprocal tariffs imposed on Chinese goods and not the baseline tariff of 20% that stays in effect. Take a look.
President Donald Trump's administration granted exclusions reciprocal tariffs on smartphones, computers, and some other electronics imported largely from China, providing a big break to tech companies that rely on imported products. In a notice to shippers late on Friday, U.S. Customs and Border Protection published a list of tariff codes excluded from the import taxes retroactive to April 5th, covering 20 broad product categories such as computers, laptops, disk drives, automatic data processing, and more. While the White House did not explain the move, a spokesperson said the exclusion only applies to Trump's reciprocal tariffs on Chinese goods, which climbed to 125% this week. Trump's action also excludes the specified electronics from his 10% baseline tariffs on goods from most other countries, easing import costs for semiconductors from Taiwan and Apple iPhones produced in India. The president's 20% duties on all Chinese imports, which he said were related to the U.S. fentanyl crisis, remain in place. White House spokesperson Carolyn Leavitt said in a separate statement that Trump has made it clear the U.S. cannot rely on China to manufacture critical technologies such as semiconductors, chips, smartphones, and laptops. She added that at Trump's direction, major tech firms including Apple and chip makers NVIDIA and Taiwan Semiconductor, quote, are hustling to onshore their manufacturing in the United States as soon as possible. The exemptions suggest an increased awareness within the Trump administration of the pain that his tariffs had in store for inflation-weary consumers, especially on popular products like smartphones. Analysts predicted that the price of a top-end Apple iPhone could jump to $2,300 from $1,599 with a 54% tariff rate. At 125%, economists and analysts have said that U.S.-China trade could largely halt. Earlier this week, financial markets were in turmoil as Trump announced sweeping reciprocal tariffs on U.S. trading partners. Trump's tariff policies have raised fears of a U.S. recession and drew criticism from his fellow Republicans.
All right, and now just a day after the electronics sector was granted relief from the steep 125% tariff, and this 125% on China-made U.S. imports, now U.S. is preparing to impose a separate set of tariffs specifically for smartphones, computers, semiconductors and other electronic component imports into the country, now likely in the upcoming 1 to 2 month period. News portal ABC News yesterday cited U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Now, this is what Howard Lutnick has said, and I quote, "We can't be relying on China for fundamental things that we need. Our medicines and our semiconductors need to be built in America," says Howard Lutnick, the U.S. Commerce Secretary. Now, remember, just last week on Friday, the Donald Trump administration exempted the imports of smartphones and laptops from the steep tariffs which the nation imposed on China, providing a break to importers like Apple. Now, meanwhile, China's Commerce Ministry on Sunday appealed to the United States to completely cancel its reciprocal tariffs after President Donald Trump announced an exemption for smartphones, laptops, and, like we told you, other consumer electronics. Beijing said that they were still evaluating the move to exclude certain electronics as most Chinese goods still face a blanket 145% duty after the country was excluded from a 90-day tariff pause. Now, on Friday, China raised tariffs on the U.S. goods from 84% to 125% after the U.S. increased the duties it had levied on Chinese products to a total of 145%. China also called on other countries to unite against Trump's unilateralism and what it calls economic bullying, and has tried to pursue trade opportunities with other partners. In a statement issued on Friday, China's Commerce Ministry had expressed confidence in emerging victorious in the trade war against the U.S.
Can you walk us through that decision?
I'll give you that answer on Monday. We'll be very specific on Monday.
Are you suggesting
but we're taking in a lot of money. As a country, we're taking in a lot of money.
All right, now, as long as smartphones are exempt from tariffs, will India have the sticker advantage in the US for iPhones as was previously estimated? Now, on different days and sometimes on the same day at different times, the Trump administration says different things. But as per industry body ICEA, the answer to that question is yes, India could see a 20% cost advantage over China. Now, a disclaimer, this number was reported when the assumption that the baseline tariff will stay on all Chinese exports to the US, including smartphones. Now, export of iPhones, smartphones, tablets, laptops from India to the US will be cheaper by about 20% compared to those shipped from China following the exemptions given by the Trump administration. This as per industry body ICEA, which said this on Sunday. Now, the US Saturday, the previous day, amended its tariff order to exempt smartphones, tablets, laptops and some other electronic devices from the new taxes. According to ICEA Chairman Pankaj Mohindru, China still has 20% of iPhones, laptops, tablets and watches. Only reciprocal tariff has been removed for China. India, meanwhile, has zero tariff on iPhones and all smartphones, laptops and tablets exported from India to the US. Now, Vietnam also has zero tariff on all Samsung and other smartphones, laptops and tablets exported to the US. So, India and Vietnam are similarly placed on tariffs on these products and both enjoy a 20% tariff advantage over China. Now remember, Apple's iPhone ecosystem in India has become the largest job creator in the country and is one of the top exported items from India. According to ICA, mobile phone exports from India have crossed an all-time high of 2 lakh crore rupees in 2024-25, registering a handsome 55% growth over the previous year. Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav has also said that iPhones alone accounted for 1.5 lakh crore rupees worth of exports in the smartphone segment. Now, the reciprocal tariff regime announced by US President Donald Trump has raised serious concerns on Apple's iPhone production plan in China as well as in India. However, in a relief for that sector, the Trump administration later said they will exclude electronics like smartphones and laptops from reciprocal tariffs imposed on China as well as other countries. Now, the move can help keep prices down for popular consumer electronics goods that aren't usually made in the US. Meanwhile, IESA President Ashok Chandak said, and I quote, that continued underlying tensions and uncertainties may prompt global players to diversify their manufacturing base, creating a timely opportunity for India to emerge as a preferred alternative. Now, despite the dampening of near-term export euphoria, the long-term opportunity for India, as per Chando, remains robust. Now, he said, with the US importing over $250 billion worth of smartphones and computer goods, 30% of which currently come from China, India, with exports currently at $12 billion or so, still has a significant growth headroom. Now, as such, for Indian businesses, this is a vital window to scale up operations, he said, and reorient strategies and strengthen their positions in global electronics value chains. Now, to fully realize this potential, as per Chandak, India must double down on building long-term sustainable competitive advantages. But will the iPhone manufacturing really move to the US? And that seems to be the hope that President Donald Trump is playing this entire tariff war on electronics with. Now, that doesn't seem to be likely as per Counterpoint Research. Now, Counterpoint Research Vice President Neil Shah believes that moving manufacturing and supply chains to the US by charging higher tariffs is not practical and in turn hurts the most valuable American companies such as Apple, Nvidia and others. He said, and I quote, that bringing back the manufacturing of smartphones, especially iPhones, is going to be a marathon and not a sprint if the US government is serious about it. And it really is, if it really is serious, it could mean now is not the time and will need a very different strategy and a multi-year incentive scheme. And staying with the Apple iPhone production, we thought this Monday morning is a good day, like any other, to tell you all the numbers that you need to know about what's happening in India's smartphone industry. So I bring to you the smartphone news in numbers today. Let's begin with India's total smartphone export, and that's a number you should know. 2 lakh crore rupees is India's total exports of smartphones in FY25, the year that ended on 31st March. Now, out of this, 1.5 lakh crore rupees is India's total iPhone exports. iPhone exports are now 75% of India's total smartphone exports. So at 1.5 lakh crore rupees, that's the number. Now, Apple India's total exports, not just smartphones, not just the iPhones, but Apple India's total exports for FY25 stood at 1.89 lakh crore rupees. Now, this ensures that Apple makes as much as, and mind this number, as much as 20% of all iPhones sold in the world. 20% of those come from India. Remember, in the previous story, we told you that 30% of all US smartphones and iPhones come from China, but India makes 20% of all iPhones in the world. Now, Apple India's output for FY25 has grown by as much as 60%. That is the growth rate that Apple's output in India has seen. Now, Apple's China suppliers, on the contrary, are as many as 200 odd suppliers. That's and the kind of value base that China has, that Apple has in China, and shifting that to the US is going to be problematic, is what industry experts say. Now, moving on to the next number that you should know is $2.7 billion. Now, $2.7 billion is likely to be the government's new incentive for the electronics sector. Remember, this comes after the PLI scheme was reported not to get a recharge. Now, let's move to Apple iPhone's market share in India. Well, that stands at a solid 8% now. 8% is Apple iPhone's market share in India, and iPhone sales in India for the calendar year gone by, Jan to December last year, was as much as $8 billion. Well, it's time for a short break right now, but coming up on the other side, are 40s turning fatal for your career and your growth as an employee? We will bring you that on the other side. Joining us will be Praveer Jha, HR strategist, who will help us decode what you as an employee can do in your fatal 40s. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
living. I need my career.
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया.
Smash your way to glory at the News 9 Corporate Badminton Championship. Get ready for the ultimate badminton showdown. News 9 presents the biggest corporate championship, a battle of skill, speed and supremacy. Cash prize of 6 lakh rupees across categories. Venue, Pulela Gopichand Badminton Academy, Hyderabad. Dates, May 9th to May 11th. A chance to showcase your talent and make a mark. The court is set. Are you ready? Register now.
Mama must be missing us, na?
Let's take it for a spin, give me one day. Feel the itch under my skin, it's a one day. You believe it when you see me and done, hey. It doesn't matter, just gotta get going.
New GT line, Tygoon and Virtus. Volkswagen.
Bharat welcomes the world to a new era of creativity. Waves, World Audio-Visual and Entertainment Summit. Connecting creators through Creative Sphere. Wave Accelerator. Waves Bazaar.
Where stories, ideas and content go global.
Connecting countries through global media dialogue and Bharat Pavilion.
Shaping narratives and partnerships. Culture, cinema, gaming. Waves fuels the next wave of entertainment.
Connecting creators, connecting countries. Waves 2025.
You are watching the Morning Brief at 9. Well, are 40s turning fatal for your career as an employee. Well, that seems to be the sentiment echoed by Shantanu Deshpande, the founder and CEO of Bombay Shaving Company. And why he feels that 40s could be turning fatal is because of two very important factors. Number one, in your 40s, you seem to be drawing higher salaries, and add to that, there is also the seniority tag that gets associated with you as an employee. So the view really is that people above 40 are expensive, and parallelly, they're also less tech savvy. Now, if you are in your 40s, there are chances that your career, which is looking at fertility, could involve not just your own fertility, but also that of your dreams and perhaps the well-being of your family. Because in your 40s is when your kids are in higher classes or perhaps entering college. You've got EMIs to pay for your dream cars and dream houses that you've bought. Of course, there are chances that you've also got elderly parents which you need to support, and once all these expenses kick in, chances are that you wouldn't have enough savings in your bank account. So what is this 40 over 40 problem, or the 40-40 problem? Well, as per Shantanu Deshpande, the 40-40 problem is affecting people who are 40 years or more and earn 40 lakh rupees annually. You are seen as overqualified, you're seen as too costly, and you're also seen as lacking modern tech skills, which seem to be important for organizations these days. So fatal 40s are here perhaps to stay, but there are certain solutions which have also been suggested, and these could involve upskilling in perhaps AI and technology. Then of course saving aggressively to not fall victim to this fatal 40s phenomena, and developing an entrepreneurial mindset. Well, it seems easy said than done. Well, joining me to discuss this morning is Mr. Prabir Jha, HR strategist. Mr. Jha, good morning. Pleasure having you back here on News 9. Fatal 40s, is this something really to be scared and worried about as a trend, or do you think this is a temporary blip and hopefully the employer mindset should change and experience should be valued more?
So, I've been talking about this the last some years now, and I'm glad that, a channel like yours has picked it up. This is a reality, and it's going to get worse. I wish I could say otherwise. And, for the last 5 years, I've been screaming this, that if you can ride through your 40s, maybe you will cruise along till you're 60. But 40s, and for many reasons that you've cited, Shantanu, I would believe that it's a fact. India, ageism is the biggest bias. It's not anything else. But in India, ageism is the biggest bias. There is a mindset very strongly about having younger leaders. Sometimes it's very comical because, in my advisory role, I also do some search work. And in the last 5 years, every search mandate for a C-suite executive that I have serviced, I was told I want a guy between 40 to 45. And I would ask, what happens if the guy is 46? Yeah. What happens if the guy is 50? Right. So, I think it's very artificial. But the reality is that India is a talent surplus market. Okay. There are young people being churned in every year. And as they are kind of riding, they are cheaper. And let's be very honest, the experience or the skill set of many people who are in their 40s is not necessarily, differentiating enough. So unless you reinvent your career, your thinking, your leadership, apart from exposure to technology and stuff that you've already flashed, I think it is going to be a very, very difficult, 40s for most people who are wanting to build long-term careers.
All right, Mr. Jha. So is cost the only problem? Because, one also tends to understand that overqualification of a job, over experience for a job also becomes a hindrance. Well, can overqualification and over experience ever be a problem? Or are these just better words that employers are using to not sound ageist and say, hey, you're too expensive and you're too old, we don't want you?
Well, the answer is in two halves, but there is no denying that there has been historically a bias for higher education and higher experience. For someone like me in my own executive experience, I've had experiences of asking people, what does the job really need? And the job does not always need an MBA, does not always need a BTech degree, does not always need a CA. And there is a case which I've written about for many years that you can go down the education value chain. So that is one. Second is experience in number of years, I don't think is the answer.
Okay.
Because beyond a point in time, it's the same job done 5 more years, 10 more years, 15 more years. And individual employees have also preferred to be riding these crutches, assuming that I've got 20 years experience, 25 years experience, 30 years experience. It doesn't make any difference to the quality of the job. Sometimes, I'm not saying not all times, because there are some brilliant people, and that's why the ageism bias that I've called out, and therefore wrong calls also that companies make.
Right.
But individuals do not prepare themselves to be smarter, sharper, different. What do you bring to the table for the job that you do?
Right.
And I'll add just one last perspective. Even if you look at organization design, and I see this with many of my client companies, they are not fit for purpose for today's times. They are highly overly hierarchical, too many levels, too many layers. So, typically a guy in the mid 40s gets typically stuck in the mid management.
Right.
Unless he or she has broken into the top leadership. And that's where, a lot of the effect of the fat, lot of the inertia, low agility starts building up, and therefore silos and territorialism. So it is actually an organizational problem also. Right? And because companies do not invest enough in preparing people for different stages in their career, it is left to the individual to prepare and decide. And unfortunately, in India particularly, I do not see awareness about career design. There is still a talk about career planning, which in my view is dead. So I do a lot of work in designing careers, because you 30 years or 35 years of your career anymore. That is absolutely dead.
Right. So, Mr. Jha, I think what everybody watching this show wants to know, and especially those who are in their 40s, I'm one of them. The question is, what does one do? What are the solutions? We know the problem is there. We know the mindset is there. But I think just saying that train yourself on AI or get more tech savvy or become an entrepreneur seems to be, easier said than done. So what are the solutions really? How do you break this mindset, and how do you make yourself relevant as you progress in your career and hope to continue progressing in your career?
So I will, Karthik, give 3 or 4 top of the mind, suggestions. One is always take a pause every year, maybe 3 days, 2 days, whatever. The challenge of people in their 30s or 40s is they have been on the treadmill. No one has paused to reflect, are you running on the right lane, and are you running smart enough? Or are you just running, or are you just walking? So first is learn to pause. Ask yourself, why would you actually go 2 levels higher? Forget the emotions around loyalty or tenure, etc. I mean, just 5 more years and you'll go 2 levels higher. Why? And therefore, this is the first thing that people should do. Pause, look at yourself in the mirror, take an honest talk to people who can help you, work with a coach. I know of people who have connected with me in their mid 40s to help coach them. So one is that first pause, ask yourself the tough question, which way is the world going?
Okay.
Second, 40s is also your midlife issue. So there's a life space issue and a career space issue.
Right.
You cannot look at career in isolation of your life, right? So where do you want to seek your fulfillment? Often people like to do the same job, same line, same function for the next 20 years. It's not going to happen.
Right.
So start getting comfortable with trapeze movements. Get out of doing what you've done, unless you want to be such a technical expert, a functional expert, of a left ventricle heart surgeon. You must be able to swing the trapeze. The discomfort to get out of your comfort zone is very palpable. You have to fight that. So that's the second thing. Change your function, change your industry, change your role, change your city. You can't have the cake and eat it too. Right? With all the other problems. So that's the second part. There are choices to be made, and you must. People expect that rose petals will be shard and careers made. That's not going to happen. So that's the second thing. Third is, of course, you have got to kind of. I'm not saying only technology. I work with a lot of middle to senior managers, Karthik, and I'll be surprised. People do not even know, and people with 20 years experience in a recent 2 companies I can remember up front. I said, have you heard of VUCA? 2 hands went up. They don't read. They are not even aware of what's happening. How many of people follow business channels or business papers?
Right.
There is interest in reading beyond learning only on the job, and learning on the job beyond a point is diminishing marginal return.
All right.
So please learn wide, read wide, be curious, And, ideally, you should not wait to be in the 40s to be curious.
Right.
And that is why I believe companies have their own share of challenges and reactions. Not always do I support that. But people also have not been curious enough. So at least three things that they are able to do, they will make better calls rather than sitting put and assuming the horse is going to carry them beyond the post. It's not going to happen.
All right, Mr. Prabir Shah, we will leave it at that. Become a trapeze artist is the word coming in. Get out of your comfort zone. Perhaps read more and stay more updated and abreast with what is happening in the world. Well, for all our viewers who were perhaps not part of the two hands that went up that Mr. Jha was talking about, VUCA is the world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. Well, we will leave it at that, Mr. Jha. Thank you so much for taking time out this Monday morning. And moving on to other news now, fugitive businessman Mehul Choksi, wanted in the 14,000 crore rupee PNB loan fraud case, has been arrested in Belgium on Sunday. Now, Choksi was taken into custody on Saturday at the request of CBI and remains in jail. And this as per news reports citing sources. Now, Choksi was reportedly living in Belgium's Antwerp with his wife Preeti Choksi after securing an F residency card in the country. Choksi's arrest marks a major development in the years-long effort to bring him to justice after he fled India in 2018. He has been on the run from Indian authorities after he allegedly had a massive financial scam, the PNB scam of 14,000 crore rupees. Now, Choksi, along with his nephew Nirav Modi, is wanted by Indian authorities in the same scam. Now, they have been accused, like we told you, of defrauding the Punjab National Bank of over 14,000 crore rupees. Well, joining me and make sense of where the story could move from here now is Deshpande. Brijesh, good morning. Thanks for being here with us. Help us understand what are the options available to the Indian authorities to get Mehul Choksi back in the country, and what are the options that Choksi has himself from here on?
Well, what we've been given to understand is that the Indian authorities were in touch with Belgian authorities, and they also impressed upon the authorities that there's an Interpol red corner has been issued against Mehul Choksi as far as this 14,000 crore Punjab National Bank case, loan fraud case is concerned. And, there were interaction of the Belgian minister with news channel reporters there. And he said that, that the Belgian authorities are in, they understand the sensitivity this case has, and they will help India as much as possible. And after that, news of Mehul Choksi arrest case has come. Now, Mehul Choksi has moved court, or what we've been given to understand is that he has moved court where he's seeking bail on the grounds that he's not keeping good health. He will also be likely, in all likelihood, is also be talking about the jail conditions in India, and would want to stall the extradition process as much as possible. But the thing is that Indian authorities will also be presenting their side of the case, and how crucial custodial interrogation of Mehul Choksi in solving this financial fraud of a mammoth 14,000 crore rupees concern. I think Indian authorities will also try to impress upon the Belgian authorities that that Mehul Choksi should be extradited to India to facilitate movement forward as far as this particular case is concerned. It'll be very, very interesting to see how this move forward, because if he gets bail from the jail, then it will clear the path as far as Indian investigative agency is concerned. But nevertheless, it's a big breaking news which Indians have woken up this morning about the arrest of Mehul Choksi in Belgium. Karthik?
All right, Brijesh, India has an extradition treaty with Belgium, and that is what we were discovering this morning. How much pressure do you think the Indian authorities can exert on Belgium to get an early extradition of Mehul Choksi?
Well, I think, the first thing is that, that the court has to decide on the bail issue of Mehul Choksi. If the court grants him bail, then, it will clear the path, and it will further lead to legal ramifications where the authorities will be forced to approach a higher court to cancel the bail of Mehul Choksi. But if the court dismisses the bail, I think, he has his right to appeal till the highest court as far as his arrest is concerned. But once the legal option runs out, then I think, the Indian authorities will be in a much better position to extradite, because the Belgian authorities have also conveyed, officially and unofficially, that they are aware of the sensitivity of Indian authorities as well as the case is concerned. So I think, once he runs out of legal option, then extradition will not take much time.
All right, how soon will he run out? Because it seems Mehul Choksi can run but can't hide anymore. Brijesh Pandey, thank you so much for joining us here on Morning Brief at 9. Well, moving on now, gold prices have jumped as much as, hold your breath, 23% this calendar year alone. We're talking from the period of Jan 1st, 2025 to as recent as yesterday, Sunday. Now, in the month of April alone, gold has seen as much as a 5% jump. MCX Gold June 5th contract has hit an all-time high of as much as 93,940 rupees per 10 grams on Friday. Now, as expected, it's not just India but even international gold prices that have seen strong gains, with as much as $3,263 per ounce being the gold rate. Now, let's try and make sense of why gold is rising and whether this trend is likely to continue. First up, why are gold prices rising? Well, very obvious. Number one factor moving in favor of gold is the ongoing trade war and the jitters that the trade war is causing, where people want to hold as much gold as they can. Number two is China's own buying action. The Chinese central bank is on a buying spree, continuing to buy gold in a bid perhaps to decouple from the US dollar. Now, add to this, there is a heightened market uncertainty. Stock markets, remember, have been volatile across the world, and this volatility largely stemming on account of tariff announcements and changing stances on foreign policy as well as economic policy by the Trump administration, which is keeping stock markets on the hook. And when stock markets are low, people prefer buying gold. Now, there's another fear which is driving people towards gold, and that is the fear of recession, the R word. Recession fears loom. Now, there are some estimates that suggest that there's as much as a 60% probability of the US going into recession, if not this year, then definitely next year. So that is moving the fascination for gold even higher. Now, add to these recession fears is the declining dollar index, which means that the US dollar and its own price appreciation is under threat, and that is moving people to purchase gold. So why do all these factors really get gold prices to drive up? Well, very simple three-word answer, and that is called the safe haven asset investment. So gold is seen as the safest asset to buy during volatile times. Now, what are the chances of the price rise, or the rally as they call it, to continue? Well, some experts expect that the rally will continue. And why will this rally continue? Well, number one, because there is likely to be the pressure on the US dollar, and if the US dollar is weak, there are chances that the US Fed may go ahead and cut interest rates. Now, some experts are of the view that the international could be in the range of $3,300 to about $3,500 per ounce in coming years. Now, this means that for the domestic market, the domestic Indian gold market, prices of gold could go as high as 97,000 rupees per 10 grams by the end of 2025. All right, and before we head into a break, let's look at the global headlines making news today. The US government grants tariff exclusion for smartphones and computers, electronics imported from China, sparing them from President Trump's 125% reciprocal tariff. Now, just today after electronics were granted relief from the steep 125% tariff, US prepares to impose new tariffs on smartphones, computers, semiconductors and electronics, as per US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. US President Donald Trump says bond market had a little movement but solved it quickly. Expects dollar to rise with economic plan. Meanwhile, Wall Street ended a volatile week on Friday with major gains as banks report strong earnings, while concerns over President Trump's trade war and inflation risks continue to impact global markets. Major US banks report strong first quarter profits but warn that Trump's sweeping tariffs could add on to the risks, impact economic growth and lead to market volatility. From Donald Trump's escalating tariff war with China to economic uncertainty impacting US consumers to upcoming US retail sales data and corporate earning reports, we tell you the key stories in business and finance this week. Chinese President Xi Jinping urges EU to stand with China against US tariff pressure, calls for unity in defending globalization and opposing unilateral bullying. An online fashion giant Shein secures crucial UK regulatory approval for London IPO amid global trade tensions and pending Chinese green light. Argentina secures a $20 billion IMF deal and dismantles key currency controls in major economic policy shift ahead of disbursement. These stories and more on the other side. You are watching Morning Brief at 9.
Smash your way to glory at the News 9 Corporate Badminton Championship. Get ready for the ultimate badminton showdown. News 9 presents the biggest corporate championship, a battle of skill, speed and supremacy. Cash prize of 6 lakh rupees across categories. Venue, Pulela Gopichand Badminton Academy, Hyderabad. Dates, May 9th to May 11th. A chance to showcase your talent and make a mark. The court is set. Are you ready? Register now.
On my dear cool. ये एयर कंडीशनर नहीं, AI कंडीशनर है।
What is to the nines? In literal terms, it's perfection. But to us, it's not just a phrase, it's an attitude. One that starts at your desk and sends a statement to the world. To the nines is about taking charge. It's a way of life where every seam, every fold, is crafted with excellence. It's timeless elegance and uncompromising quality made for the corner office. It's the ideas that inspire redefining order and elevating the tabletop. To the nines, for the leaders of today and the visionaries of tomorrow.
In a huge setback for bike taxi services in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu races ahead with 9.69% growth rate, India's fastest growing state this year. Good for Tamil Nadu. You may not be directly involved with what your son or daughter does, but your influence does work. My name is Sudha Sadanand. Welcome to the South Indian.
You are watching Morning Brief at 9. Let's bring you all the global stories that we're tracking for you this morning. Now, another major dramatic shift in US immigration policy. The Trump-backed administration is now enforcing a very controversial 30-day rule for all foreign nationals in the United States of America. So if you're in the US for over 30 days, you must register with federal authorities. And failing to do so, well, this could mean fines, jail, or even deportation. Even if you hold a visa, a green card or work permit, you are now required to carry an ID at all times in the US. The new regulation is rooted in World War II era law and now revived with a federal judge's approval. Immigrant rights groups are up in arms, but the rule stands, at least for now. The message from the White House is loud and clear: register or be deported. Now, children turning 14 must re-register and submit fingerprints within 30 days of their birthday. Similarly, foreign nationals arriving after the 11th of April must register within 30 days if they do not already possess the required registration documentation. US President Donald Trump dismissed recent jitters in the bond market, saying it had a little moment, this week, but claimed he resolved the issue immediately. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump also expressed confidence in his economic strategy, predicting that once it's fully understood, the US dollar will go way up. Listen in.
I think the markets were solid today. I think people are seeing we're in great shape. We're making a lot of money as a country now for the first time in a long time. We were losing millions of dollars a day, and now we're making millions of dollars a day. It's a big difference. And we then brought it down to 10%. And so that made it a little bit less, but I did that because I wanted to be fair to other people, to other countries. I think the bond market's going good. It had a little moment, but I solved that problem very quickly. I'm very good at that stuff, and I solved it very quickly. I didn't know I solved it that well. We had the biggest day in history.
How concerned were you about the bond market? To what extent did that play a role?
It wasn't, a lot of people say, was that, no, it wasn't.
What was it?
I want to put the country in an unbelievable economic position, which is where we should be.
All right, moving from bond market and US dollar to the stock market. Well, Wall Street posted major gains on Friday as big banks kicked off the first quarter earnings season. Investors wrapped up a volatile week marked by market jitters amid the US President Donald Trump's multi-front trade war. Dow added more than 1.5%, the S&P rose 1.8%, and the Nasdaq climbed 2%. But remember, Indian stock markets are closed today on account of Ambedkar Jayanti, but other Asian peers are open, and that's the mood of Asian markets this morning. The Japan's Nikkei 225 is up about 1.6%. South Korean Kospi is up almost 0.9 percentage point. Biggest gain coming in this morning from Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index, which is up about 2.5% in trade. Meanwhile, mainland China's Shanghai Composite is up again about 0.9 percentage point. Taiwan, the semiconductor maker of the world, the chip maker of the world, the TAIEX index is up about 0.5 percentage point in trade this morning. Let's look at the heat map of all these economies and their stock markets. On your screen right now is Japan's Nikkei 225, looking mostly green in trade this morning. Let's move on now to the Hang Seng Index, and this is registering strong gains. See, Tencent is up about 3% in trade this morning. Energy stocks also up more than 3% on average. Let's move on now to South Korea's Kospi and big household brands in the US. Samsung, LG registering strong gains in trade. Remember, this comes after news of the electronics being reasonably spared from Trump tariffs. And let's move on now to the Taiwan Stock Exchange, and Taiwan seems to be reeling under a little bit of a pressure right now, especially the semiconductor maker TSMC, which is down about 8%, and this movement in stock coming after the US had made a statement that it may have a separate tariff rate for semiconductors and smartphones. So the TSMC stock reacting there to that news development. All right, and moving on now from US President Donald Trump's tariff moves to the growing economic uncertainty impacting US consumers. One of the major events this week will be the release of the monthly US retail sales data on Wednesday. This will offer fresh insights into whether economic and tariff-related uncertainty is influencing consumer behavior. Here's a look at the top stories to look out for in the week ahead.
From Trump's tariff moves whipping up volatility to how economic uncertainty is weighing on U.S. consumers. These are the stories to watch in business and finance in the coming week. U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs and subsequent reversal have whipped up volatility across markets. While there have been bigger absolute moves in stocks, bonds, and currencies in past crises, very few have been this fast. U.S. assets are the focus of the selling at the moment, with treasuries, stocks, and the dollar shooting higher, only to drop just as fast. Donald Trump's campaign of global tariffs now seems very much a trade war with China. Not only was China omitted from Trump's 90-day tariff reprieve, the U.S. president ramped them up. Beijing then upped its own levies on U.S. shipments to 125%, but says it won't go further. A China data dump, including trade, factory production, and retail sales figures, is due over the next week. How tariff chaos may impact policymakers' thinking on rate cuts will be the focus when the European Central Bank meets on Thursday. Traders now fully price in another 25 basis point cut, and they predict 2 more moves after that, a sharp increase from March. That speaks to the threat facing the European economy, which is still hit by a broad 10% tariff, not to mention higher duties on steel, aluminum, and cars. The latest test of whether economic and tariff uncertainty is weighing on U.S. consumer behavior comes on Wednesday, with the release of the monthly U.S. retail sales data. Corporate earnings reports also pick up steam in the coming week, with markets expecting profit warnings ahead. Streaming giant Netflix is among the companies set to report, with its results due on Thursday.
All right, moving on now. Chinese President Xi Jinping has urged closer cooperation between China and the European Union, telling Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez that both sides must work together to defend globalization and push back against what he called unilateral acts of bullying by the United States. Remember, Xi's comments are being seen as a clear rebuke to US President Donald Trump's aggressive tariff policies.
President Xi Jinping on Friday urged the EU to join China in defending globalization and opposing unilateral acts of bullying. That was a clear swipe at renewed US tariffs under President Donald Trump. The comments, Xi's first publicly since Trump's tariff move, are also a sign of how Beijing is looking to mend a straining relationship with the EU to weather the trade war with the US. But diplomats and analysts say ending a prolonged stalemate between the world's second and third largest economies won't be easy. During his visit to Beijing on Friday, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said there were opportunities for China and the EU to deepen their ties.
Profundizar esa relación bilateral entre España y China y entre China y la Unión Europea.
But he said it would be important for China to be sensitive to European demands for a more balanced relationship. The EU and other major trading partners argue that Chinese overinvestment in manufacturing is flooding the world with goods. Beijing accuses the EU of being protectionist. European diplomats, having seen years of discussions that resulted in no progress, are not holding high hopes for a reset. One, speaking anonymously, said China needs to show that they're serious, while another said China sees an opportunity for concessions but isn't really interested in improving ties. Spanish officials have rejected US warnings that a pivot to China would be, quote, cutting their own throat. Instead, Sanchez appears to be seeking to position Spain as an interlocutor between China and the EU. Recent developments show both sides are stepping up coordination. The EU and China have revived minimum pricing negotiations on Chinese-made electricals, a solution to the bloc's tariffs imposed last year that Beijing has long advocated. All this comes as Trump backtracked on Wednesday on the hefty duties he had just imposed on dozens of countries, while immediately hiking tariffs on China to 145% from 104%. Analysts believe China views Europe as politically divided and weak after election, and hopes that tariff pressure from Washington will make EU member states more open to deepening investment ties with Beijing.
And finally, online fashion giant Shein has taken a major step toward going public in the United Kingdom. According to Reuters sources, the company has secured approval from Britain's Financial Conduct Authority for its planned initial public offering in London. Now, Shein first filed the necessary paperwork with the FCA last June, and the latest green light brings the Chinese-founded retailer closer to what could be one of the biggest London listings in years. Take a look.
Shein has gained approval from British regulators for its planned initial public offering in London.
That's according to two sources close to the matter. It's a major step forward for the China founding company's pursuit of a London listing. The online fast fashion retailer filed papers for an IPO with Britain's Financial Conduct Authority, or FCA, last June. But it will have to contend with market turmoil caused by US President Donald Trump's tariffs. He's put 145% levies on Chinese goods and tighter rules on duty-free shipments from China to the US. Shein sells $10 dresses and $12 jeans in more than 150 countries. And it was valued at $66 billion in its last fundraising round 2 years ago. Sources have said the firm still needs to gain approval from Chinese regulators for the London float. One said Shein had informed Beijing of the FCA's approval but hadn't yet got the nod from watchdogs there. Shein and the FCA declined to comment on the Reuters report.
Well, that's all we have for you on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. Thank you so much for watching. News continues right here on News 9.
आपके वक़्फ़ में एक भी नॉन मुस्लिम नहीं आएगा.
Waqf bill was passed by Rajya Sabha. Opposition parties have challenged the legislation in the Supreme Court.